Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition, where we keep you up to date with everything going on in the Cold Fusion community. We'll share the latest news on events, releases to engines, frameworks, libraries, and tools, as well as spotlighting quality content from the community. Welcome back to Coding with the Kiwis. Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition. And thanks for everyone for joining us because we have a special guest today, last minute, late change. And no, it's not Santa Claus, it's not Ben Forder, it's Kai Koenig. Welcome, Kai.
Thanks, Gavin. Sorry to disappoint everyone who thought it was Ben Forder. And what do you mean, with Modernize or Die? You told me we're doing Coding with the Kiwis.
Well, a little different today. We got to get this news thing done, But yeah, it looks like everyone's pretty happy to see you. But
so we're doing a news anchor thing. Cool.
Yep. I know you listened to the podcast, but for the once you got up early enough to actually join us, so that was kind of nice of you.
Yeah, I think I'd never watched the actual live stream. I get it just as a podcast in my podcast player on my phone.
Yep, so apparently there's video, there's backgrounds, there's links and chat and everything else, and so thanks for joining me. So for those who don't know, Kai Koenig is a CFML community member, he's a conference speaker, and he's a software architect at Vindigo Creative in New Zealand. So we're happy to have you, and I know you got a little announcement you want to make, but we'll wait a little bit longer before we do that. So first of all, let's just thank our sponsors. So thanks Auto Solutions, the makers of ColdBox, CommandBox, ForgeBox, TestBox, and all your other favorite boxes out there. And there's a few ways they can say thanks back to Autos, right, Kai?
Yes, for a start, you could actually look at the Autos videos on YouTube and like and subscribe them. Or you could participate in the STARS, Reach the STARS program, start and fork the Autos repos, all the ColdBox projects, the CommandBox extensions, everything that people are essentially doing at Autos for the community. Then obviously you should subscribe to the podcast or the podcasts because there's at least one other podcast series, even though it doesn't come as regularly as Modernize or Die. And you can sign up for a paid or free account on CFCasts, which is an excellent site if you want to get CFML focused upskilling and training. I have a paid account there. I can actually tell you from a customer's point of view. And there is a Box Live store where you can buy box swag. And also there are various Autos books. One that I also bought is 102 ColdBox HMVC Quick Tips and Tricks. That is on Gumroad, kind of self-published. And it's a really nice book.
Very cool. Oh, and then, of course, the other thing, which you are a Patreon, is our Patreon supporters. So right now we have 43 Patreons providing 100% funding for this podcast. And, of course, they also are helping us towards the fully funding of hosting ForgeBox.io and all the S3 builds that we have. And we're about 38, actually I think 39% with the latest Patreon we had today. So Tia, I don't have a last name, but Tia is a newest Patreon, and they just signed up, I think, yesterday. And so they're the newest Patreon. So now we're at 39% of the way to funding the ForgeBox.io stuff. So
that is really cool. I think when you look at the last, 2-3 years, your Patreons have increased in number and funding quite a bit, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. It's kind of nice. We've got all the different levels. So we got a lot of box supporters, just everyone chipping at $10 a pop, and that's great. It all helps, And then we've got the bronze members up at $50, and they get some of the perks like the ForgeBox Pro account and the CFCast subscription, which is great. And then we've got some gold as well. And then, there's other levels available. And you guys can find out more at patreon.com/autosolutions for all the different tiers and all the perks too, which we'll talk about more at the end of the show. We talk about our Patreons a little bit more. But we also have a special Patreon sponsored job announcement too. So tomorrow's guides, they're based in the UK, and they're a fast-paced leader in the UK care sector. They're catering for care seekers across 3 areas: care homes, nurseries, and home care. And they've been often called the TripAdvisor of the home care sector.
It's really interesting, right? Their product team is a team of about or over 20 individuals working across the UK remotely, and they want to expand their offering and grow their team and their company, basically. And they do work with Adobe ColdFusion 2021, Node.js, and React in Azure Cloud, and use MS SQL and MongoDB databases for that. That's really interesting. I I don't know a lot of people who actually work in Azure Cloud, and I was always wondering how that pans out for folks. So they are looking for like a senior Confusion developer or multiple senior Confusion developers and automation testers. And they offer also training path and learning Node.js along the way. So they have a whole bunch of perks from the company. There's a bonus scheme, quarterly night outs with the whole company. So I assume they meet somewhere in the UK. And pension contribution, which is probably very UK specific, I would assume.
Yep. So all the roles are available. I'm going to be posting a link in the chat right now for you guys. But they are looking for, as Kai said, a senior CF developer. So this is UK only, remote, permanent, and circa £60,000. And then the job application is there. They will require a minimum of 3 years experience with ColdFusion, database design, normalization, and ability to write and understand complex queries using MS SQL 2019, familiarity with Git, and a flexible skill set covering a wide range of development. And they also have an automation tester too, right?
Yeah, that is also UK only, remote and permanent, and the salary range is around 40k pounds. Minimum 3 years experience with automated testing, experience with tools like Selenium and I assume similar platforms, and experience with API testing and API test tools such as Postman, Fiddler, or the numerous other tools that work in this kind of ecosystem.
Yep. So it sounds pretty great. They got some great benefits too. So that £4,000 per annum discretionary company bonus scheme, 25 days annual leave plus bank holidays, the 6% employer pension contribution, access to perks and everything, long service awards, cycle to work scheme, company team night out. So a lot of cool stuff going on there. So sounds like.
So here's a random question for you, Gavin.
Yep.
Why are they called bank holidays? Do you know? I
Well,
mean, I seriously don't. It's kind of like,
Well, basically, because the only people that get them off are usually banks. We used to call them banks in
but a bank,
schools.
but a bank holiday is a public holiday, right?
No, not always. So, like in the US, for example, we have a lot of federal holidays and then some state holidays. So, a lot of banks are closed for state holidays and federal holidays, but a lot of
Ah,
other businesses aren't because their employer has to pay for it. So, usually a bank holiday is basically like a more generous federal holiday where,
okay.
like schools, usually schools and banks have more days off than most companies. Like a lot of times, a bank holiday I might work, but the people at the bank wouldn't, or the county jobs, the government jobs wouldn't. So yeah, so it's
Oh,
like
interesting.
government, bank, schools.
I always thought bank holidays were like just public holidays, and was a fancy British name for them.
I think if
Apparently
you
not.
work at a good company, then you usually get bank holidays off. But usually smaller companies that can't afford to pay them, they don't usually give bank holidays. They just give like the main ones, like over like in New Zealand, Boxing Day and Christmas Day, right? Usually those 2 days off. But a lot of smaller companies, you mainly get Christmas. And like in the US, sometimes you get Thanksgiving Day off, but not the day after. You'll get
Ah,
Christmas
yeah,
off, but
okay,
not
fair enough.
Christmas Eve. Stuff like that.
And I
So
mean, yeah, let's not forget the weird like regional or animal show holidays we have in New Zealand and Australia, like
oh yeah, well
the
that's the
Royal
thing.
Gold Coast Show Day, day off.
Yeah, exactly. So lots of interesting things there. That's my understanding. But tomorrow's guides, it looks like a good company doing cool things with Cold Fusion, and it looks like they're wanting to expand a already big team. So they're
Yeah.
supporting the podcast as a Patreon, and we want to give them a little special highlight there. So we'll tell you a little bit more in the job section. But thanks for sponsoring. But with that being said, let's jump into news and announcements. So Kai, you're here for a special announcement. I don't know if we should make them wait the entire time or not, but you don't get up every week to tune into the podcast. So Kai, what do you have for us?
So yeah, thanks a lot for having me here. And I know we arranged this like really last minute, last hour, pretty much, more or less. I thought like given that we've been taunting everyone with like cancellations and postponements and dangling carrots in front of people since like the start of the pandemic, more or less, both Michi Nat from Germany and I felt it would be really cool to give the podcast an exclusive, like a breaking news kind of thing. So without further ado, CFCamp will finally be back in June 2023. Woohoo!
Yay!
Yeah, it's kind of really amazing and exciting, actually, thinking about the possibility and the fact that it's going to happen. We have a date. It will be in the week of the 19th to 23rd of June. And the main conference will be the 22nd and 23rd. That's going to be a Thursday and Friday. And as in the past, there will be additional pre-events, probably on the Tuesday and Wednesday, I guess. I would, for example, kind of expect the Orders team running some training workshops before the conference, as you've done in the past. I heard that the Preside CMS team is looking at doing some sort of a mini PresideCon day on one of the days for the main conference as well. And we'll see what else might be happening. I mean, I don't really know at this stage yet, but there will be stuff before the main conference. The main conference itself will have 2 tracks, again, most likely. Same venue will be again at the Marriott Munich Airport, which I want to stress is not at the airport, but it's in a lovely little old town called Freising, which has like a massive church and like lots of old houses. It's kind of like for overseas visitors, it's actually a really nice little place, essentially. So Michi has booked the hotel. So that's as official as we can get at this stage. If you were to go to cfcamp.org now, you'll find there is like a save a date page listing the date, essentially. And there will be more coming soon. What we're currently working on are the sponsorship documents, and we've started to think about a call for papers and what we would want to from sessions and topic point of views, essentially. But pretty much it will be an open and transparent process again. We're going to use a tool like PaperCall or Sessionize, like in the past, and we'll try to best to increase diversity and help to get like a lot of underrepresented groups in tech out there to do talks and to, give people kind of a stage to come out of the shadow a little bit as well. At this stage, I would expect the call for papers to open in early January, because I'm not really sure if we'll manage to squeeze it onto this side of the end of the year holidays, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, potentially not, but in early Jan is kind of a safe bet to go with. So again, June 22nd and 23rd main conference in Freising in Germany, and you should save the date.
Very, very cool. So was it worth the wait, guys? Was it worth the excitement? I think it was pretty cool. So yeah, so I booted Eric last minute, but it's okay because I told him he was going to like the announcement.
Yeah, he probably wants to come back to Freising, right? He's been there at least once, I think, or twice. Can't remember.
Yeah, I think he maybe been once. I don't know. All I know is that I was trying to go and he wanted to go back, and Brad always loves going, and so we might have to have a little fight in the Otis team to see who gets in. But I guess since you guys do the anonymous papers, etc., we'll have to see who gets picked, and we'll have to go from there.
Yep. So. I'm pretty sure if you submit cool topics, that will not be the problem, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's going to be great. I know a lot of people have been looking forward to it, and as Eric says, the conference is in English, so that's good, so it helps for a lot of us. But yeah, it's definitely been on a top list for a lot of people, and I'm excited.
Yeah, the vast majority of the talks is in English. That's what I should say. I think in the past we had 1 year with 1 German session, and that was actually a session from the Bavarian State Police on cybercrime.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
Yeah, they prefer to do it in German. So, I mean, but let's say 95% of the talks and the sessions and the conference will be in English. That's kind of a safe bet to make, I think.
For sure. No, it's always been a great conference, and we're sad about the last couple of years being off, and that's why every week we remind you that we haven't heard anything about 2023 yet, but this week we can change that. So yeah, it's a great to have you guys doing it, and thanks for coming on the podcast to give us this little special announcement, because I've been harassing Kai for weeks.
I'm really looking forward to actually trying to do this, and I mean, if we learned one thing over the last a few years is like expect the unexpected, right? Like, I mean, who knows what happens, but right now we're kind of on track and as committed as we can.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, we can't control everything, but sounds like I mean, he's booked the hotel, so like you said, it's as official as it's gonna get. So very cool. So cfcamp.org, keep an eye out, and of course Kai will give us updates, and we'll try and keep you guys up to date as we go through it.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so a few people might have thought that the big announcement might have been something else, because I heard another big announcement this week that the Adobe ColdFusion Fortuna alpha has been opened up. So if you guys are in this Adobe channel in the Slack, CFML Slack, they actually have the alpha testing group for Adobe ColdFusion 2023, codename Fortuna, is available. You can sign up there, and there's a link, so I will send this link through if you guys are interested. I think they only have about 200 spots or something. There is a limit on it. And so if you guys can, if you want to do it, jump in early. But remember, it is alpha, so things will break. That's part of the process. They need reporting so they can, get things fixed up. But they've been using it for weeks now, trying to get prepped for this. So hopefully.
I would really love everyone who participates in that alpha to provide very clear feedback on features you like and you don't like in this new version of Adobe ColdFusion.
But is it too late at this point, though? That's what I always worry about when you first hear about something and it's in the alpha. It's like they're not going to undo it, but hopefully they can make it a little better. So
yeah, so that is a concern, obviously, because if features have been chosen already, that is too late then, more or less. I fully agree. I'm just very cautious because in the past, sometimes Adobe did certain features against better advice from the community, and it not always worked out great for them.
Yeah.
And
well, I am
nice
curious
to avoid these kind of things.
Yeah, and I'm curious how this MVC framework that they talked about is going to go, and this CLI, and all the other things that they were talking about. But there's a lot of stuff that I am generally curious about and looking forward to. But there's a few things that everyone's like, no, just say no. But
yeah, it's interesting, right? Like particularly about MVC framework, for example. When you look at like the wider tech sector and like other, platforms, let's say, there seems to be coming and going trends of what platforms provide, and I know that from Android a little bit and from the Android SDKs and Android development approaches. And you can see how in Wave, sometimes Google is pushing for a certain architecture, for example. Now everyone should do MVVM or, this or that. And now we provide like these components to force you all to build your apps in a certain way. And then 2 or 3 years later, it's like, oh yeah, nah, just do whatever you want again.
yeah,
So I can see a lot of benefit of like a platform provider giving people a strong guidance and how they think apps should be built. But I wish it was, a consistent approach and not just go with, I don't know, the fanciness of the day or of the year, what's currently
yeah.
in and what people like.
Yep. I mean, I definitely think that it's one of those things where we know that they don't have resources to do everything as well as they would like. And if they had unlimited resources, things would be different. But because they're limited, we want them to focus more on stuff that we can't do. And the community can do frameworks. They can do, JavaScript front ends pieces for things. We can do a lot of that. But we can't do the hard, low-level Java integrations that we've been waiting for. So that's my thing is like, if you do all that, go to town with the rest of it. But, you're not doing those things that we've had bugs in the system for 8 years because we need to be able to, handle Java interfaces better so we can implement more Java libraries. We're built on top of the JVM, but there's a lot of things missing that means we can't use the JVM effectively. So
yeah, totally with you.
So that's my thing. Like I said, obviously, Otis has an MVC. CF Wheels is out there. Framework 1 does the job. We have 3 pretty good ones. So, why try and reinvent the wheel? And if they're going to release it and then wait 8 years to update it like they did maps, then it's not going to be that effective anyway. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing. Unlimited resources, different story. But considering the the track record, help us with the stuff that the engine needs to do, and then we're fine with everything else. But anyway, I understand. So yeah, I keep saying that. But related topic, the bug tracker went mad this week, and this is probably why, right, Kai?
Yeah, and I didn't know why that was until I read your note in the show notes. So when Adobe released the alpha, they moved all the tickets to beta, and that apparently triggered a lot of emails. And some people, cough, Adam Cameron, cough,
He's in the chat too.
got apparently millions of email because pretty much every bug got moved from alpha to beta. And I mean, let's face it, Adam is you know, putting a lot of bugs in there because he finds these bugs in Adobe Cold Fusion. So apparently also all the links to the issues were broken, and yeah, that might be something with the internal management of bug tracking tools. We don't really know. I got a few last week, and I was wondering why that is, and at least I know why that was now.
Yeah, and I got a few too, but yeah, I know some people were like getting hundreds and hundreds, and then Adam's like, "What about me?" So yeah, so I'm surprised he didn't blow up his email tool with that. But anyway, but yeah, that was scary because everybody thought, well, the links are broken. There, maybe they kind of deleted them or something. But there is an internal Jira setup, and so they have Jira on the inside, and then they have this external sort of front-facing piece, which just like looks into it. So I think that's a problem. Apparently Dennis Bringle got his mailbox filled up too. But yeah, so that's usually the issue is that they have stuff internally and they kind of like post it out to the public version, and obviously they're moving so much, everything was out of sync, and so
Yeah.
at least there's a reason for it. It didn't just go crazy. It went crazy because they were releasing the alpha, so now all the new tickets would be for the beta. So that's good
I
news.
really wonder why that is, though. Why do they have two separate bug trackers? Because you can run Jira just fine as a public and private setup, right? I mean, as for
But
example, Autos proves every day. Like you have a public Jira
is
that
there
is visible for
licensing
people.
differences though, or I don't know if there's something with like that the number of people that can access it. I mean, I know that Lucy does Jira too, so I don't know. I'm not sure why they did it because they did it, and this is yeah, this comes up every once in a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know that they're using Jira under the hood. So I think Brad's talked to the engineers about that. So, but yeah, it's a little weird sometimes. And the thing is too that they'll update stuff on their side, and you'll see an email about it, but then you won't see the results on the front end. It looks like they haven't touched it in years, but it's just because the external version isn't updated. I
Yeah,
don't know.
correct.
That's frustrating. Communication is important. So,
Speaking
anyway,
about communication, you have something to communicate about into the
yes.
box, right?
Yeah, Into the Box 2023 call for speakers is now open. So, for those you who have been before, and I know Kai, you've spoken there as well. Into the Box 2023 call for speakers is now available, and you can submit your talks today.
So the interesting thing about that is it's kind of not too far away from a time point of view before CFCamp. So
It's
who
about
knows?
one
Maybe I could
month.
make it part of my trip to Europe or something.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, it's so basically we're about a month before CF Camp, but May 17th to 19th, we are moving it back into our sort of spring schedule. So better weather in the woodlands, and it'll be our 10-year anniversary. But submit your talks today. We're looking for, as Kai said, a lot of different speakers, a lot of different topics, and we're trying to get people in there, and we love having the community come and speak too. It doesn't have to be an audit show. We like to have the community contribute to it. So I think the last one we had about 40% of the talks were from the community, which is great. I mean, trust me though, like the audit team has grown a lot lately, so we are a huge number. And so a lot of the people who have spoken before as community members are now audit members, so that does make it a little bit tough. But yeah, we almost have half the sessions as community sessions, and we love it whenever people can come in and speak. And so when I think you tie in the pre-conference, it was about 50% of the speakers were not from audits, so it was really good. And we are going to do the pre-conference again this year. So if you are not able to make it and you're traveling, maybe we can do the pre-conference again, because obviously we'd like to
Yes.
have you there and have you there in person, presenting in person, but the pre-conference makes it available for those who can't travel for whatever reason, but they can still be part of the conference. And you did this year. And what do you think of the pre-conference setup?
I think it was quite good actually. The fact that it was distributed over multiple days made it nice, I think, for people to put the talks into their normal day and not having to take a big chunk of their time out of the day to attend like an event. So that format of Dev Week with 2, 3 talks a day at different times is generally nice. But obviously, like having a big chunk on one day has its benefits as well. I think the mix you had this year worked quite well. And yeah, I mean, if you want to do that again, I think that's totally worthwhile doing. Particularly because I mean, even next year, travel might potentially still be difficult for, certain countries or certain people, and not everyone likes to do trips still in 2023, most likely. So giving people the option is always cool. It's nice.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, especially if a lot of the Europeans were traveling to our conference previously, and now they're like, oh, we'll just wait for CFCamp. So we'll have to meet some of them there, but maybe they can do the pre-conference as well. So
How many Europeans did you traditionally have at Into the Box? I mean, like over the last, I don't know, 10 years. It's not a huge chunk, so it's maybe 10-15% of the audience, right?
yeah, there's not a huge amount. A lot of times we'll get the speakers because obviously we help speakers with hotels and stuff like that, and so that's definitely a positive. So we've had Mark Drew, we've had yourself, although you're not European, well, originally, but not anymore.
Not
But
kind of.
Bill, but yeah, we do get some travelers, and so it's good to see, and so. But yeah, not a huge amount, but it'll be good to see more people, at CF Camp, and hopefully some of those who have to pick between CF Summit and Into the Box now can go to CF Camp too, because like we saw Matt Gifford at CF Summit, he's living in Cyprus these days, and so he'd probably be at CF Camp, which would be harder for him to make it to ITB, but yeah, we're
Yeah,
just
I think
excited. So
the whole October date wasn't really working that well for CFCamp either anymore, and that's why we're kind of sort of halfway glad that we now have a chance to go back to where CFCamp used to be, like earlier in the year, because it's pretty much avoids this whole Oktoberfest craziness in the Munich area, when like hotels are super expensive, apartments and other places to stay are super expensive. People are traveling like crazy all over the place. It's just easier to do it far away from Oktoberfest, even though it might make it a bit less attractive for folks who come over from somewhere else and they can't put Oktoberfest into their itinerary.
yeah, but I mean the thing is, it's like for me, as my wife's a teacher now, traveling during summertime is actually an option for us. I mean, obviously summertime travel is more expensive for U.S. people usually, but it means that we don't have to worry about taking the kids out of school if we want to take them with us and do some sightseeing around the conference or whatnot. So I think it's a good thing, and I'm excited. Like I said, I already told the wife, it's like pencil us in, so we have to make sure her passport's up to date, and yeah, it'll be
Yep.
fun. Okay. We also had a little announcement last week. Did you see this about the OpenSSL vulnerabilities that Pete mentioned?
Yeah, I saw that. I mean, even outside of like CFML, essentially, because I look after a lot of Linux and Unix-based machines, and it's kind of quite a big one, actually, that OpenSSL issue. I think it had a quite high impact score of like 9 point something or something like that again. So Pete wrote a blog post because several people were asking him, are Lucy or is Adobe CF affected by this? And so he outlined everything that he could collate in terms of information in that blog post on petefreitag.com. And I think the too long don't read kind of thing is like, as far as we know, there is no issue with either Lucy or Adobe CF. And obviously, your mileage might vary depending on your other environment. Like if you're running a Linux server, you probably want to look into that at some point.
Yeah. So that's what the short of it is, you're right. And we did cover it a little bit more detail last week, in case you missed it. Another point, we also have in case you missed it, the ColdBox Master Class is completely free until the end of the year. So that's one of our packages up on CFCasts, and it's a pretty popular one. So hopefully you guys can get in there and check that one out as well. So that is, I think that's the one that Nolan did, and it's quite a long one, quite a lot of content in it. And let me just pull it up. Actually, I'll share screen for those watching. So we have 44 videos, so they're a lot more bite-sized, but almost 7 hours of content total. So tons and tons of stuff. I highly recommend doing that. If you're using ColdBox already, or if you're wanting to get into it, that's a good package. And as Nolan put in his tweet, no excuse not to learn ColdBox now. It's free until the end of the year.
Yeah, I
So
fully agree. And I've recommended that to pretty much everyone in my team who haven't worked with ColdBox yet. I think it's totally worth watching. I mean, even if you're, to be honest, like even if you've been using ColdBox for like a few years, you'll probably find something in there that you didn't know,
Yep.
realistically. And I
Yep.
mean, I've been using ColdBox for quite a while now, but I literally never built a website with ColdBox. All I'm doing is API development with it. And it's like, how do I even do a view? It's like magic for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little different than APIs for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, very cool. And then we also had a little announcement about CommandBox vNext as well.
Yeah, that is really interesting. So there is a ticket in the CommandBox Jira, and there has been a change or new support for SSL certs in PFX format. And that's kind of nice because PFX is an SSL cert standard where you have only one file that contains both public and private key. And you don't need to dangle around with those two separate files anymore in like different formats and converting them back and forth. So if you have a PFX cert, you can just throw it into the next version of CommandBox and that will just work.
Yep.
It's handy.
So I know Brad's working hard to get the next version out. We'll let you know, of course, as soon as we have that one out.
Is that next version called CommandBox 6 or is that 5.7? Do you know?
I think that'd be probably the 5.7.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe that's what his next is. It's not a major until it has to be. Okay, so next up we have some new releases and updates. So first up we have a Spreadsheet-cfml version 3.7.0 release. And so Julian has released that with a new option to read visible format instead of raw values, which is really neat. James Moberg was on Twitter asking about this. And so when you're reading from the spreadsheet, normally you get, the raw values, but sometimes you want to actually have the date formatted a certain way. And if the spreadsheet already does that, this will allow you to read that value instead. So that's actually pretty cool. Obviously getting the raw value is useful another time as well. So now you have the option. So, and then of course they did find an issue. James Moberg already filed an issue with Adobe CF 2021 about it, and he's posted 3 bugs in 30 days according to his tweet. So it's pretty interesting. But yeah, there are lots of little things going on there, but 3.7 is released. And again, if you haven't used that, it's a great library for working with spreadsheets on Lucy and Adobe. So we also
Cool.
have a Raygun for CFML 1.5.0 release, right?
Yeah, so I just put that out there yesterday. Totally unrelated to this whole podcast thing today.
Sure.
Yeah, really. So for people who don't know what Raygun is, it's a crash reporting and user experience quality monitoring service. Basically, like a place where you can log your crashes, analyze them, get notifications into all sorts of other places, other channels like Slack and like SMS and whatever, and then action these these issues. And the Raygun for CFML is a basically data provider to that I write on open source basis because I use it a lot. So I added a few new features like you can send issues asynchronously now, which
Well,
weirdly enough, I never needed so far because I was always wrapping my whole call from the application into a thread. But that is now supported on the provider level. And I also support a grouping key now. So that is kind of interesting because sometimes you get like issues that are not exactly the same, but very similar. So, like let's say you run into a timeout, your request expires after 30 seconds or something like that. And the error message is like, this request expired after 30,427 milliseconds. And it doesn't really matter to me if, it was 30,427 or 428 milliseconds. That's the same issue, realistically.
yeah.
So with that grouping key, you can just throw them into the same bucket, essentially now.
Okay.
And there are a whole bunch of other things coming soon. In parallel, I'm working on a 2.0 release that makes it a proper ColdBox module and adds a whole lot of other things to it. And this is really just like a bug fix and feature release because I needed stuff now without doing the 2.0 release.
Gotcha. Very cool. Okay. Well, next up, we also have the S3SDK Bleeding Edge. It now supports encrypting files at rest. So Brad's been working a lot for a couple of clients on the S3 SDK, and he's now got the supporting files at rest in the S3 to be encrypted. You can let AWS manage the keys, or you can provide your own AES 256 key. Remember, the S3 SDK does not require ColdBox to use it. And you also want to say thanks to all the clients who sponsor features like this one. And so this is in the BE right now. It hasn't been released properly just yet. We're just doing some final testing with those couple of clients. But the tests do pass. He did write the tests, and if you look at the tweet, you'll see them. But yeah, so that's done. And so it was pretty interesting with the key stuff, though. It's like if you don't provide a key, S3 will give you one for it. But that means anyone who has the keys to get to the files automatically have the encryption keys. And like, so I guess this just stops people on the system who can access the drive in general just wandering around looking at files or searching the files. But yeah, it's
It,
kind of
it can
interesting.
also be a compliance requirement,
Yeah.
irrespectively how realistic the threat is. Some compliance certificates, like, I don't know, PCI, for example, might require these kind of things.
Yeah, and that's the reason that we actually did it for one of our clients is they wanted to have all the S3 files, encrypted at rest. But we don't want to have to use the AWS system, so we just use the default one that S3 does. But it's interesting, anyone who has the keys can automatically decrypt it. So it's like, who are you stopping it from if it's not someone that has your keys?
Yeah.
But yeah. We also had another feature spec, sorry. I was thinking about futures, but so Luis has been working hard on some new stuff with ColdBox 7 and Wirebox 7. So now he's released the spec for Wirebox lazy properties. So if you guys have seen lazy loaded, basically, this will allow you to basically have a property constructed once when requested. So lazy loaded, and you can handle it with just a little metadata saying lazy. And that way it won't actually do it until you need it. So there's a little spec here. He hasn't built it out. I believe it's available on the BE already. But if you guys got some thoughts, go share them with Luis regarding that. But we're trying to release them. I like the sort of format instead of just releasing something to the public with no sort of feedback mechanism. It's kind of nice to send that out there, and that way people can jump in. I think Adam said he jumped into the previous ones because last week we talked about the Wirebox delegates. So in case you missed that, Wirebox now has delegates available. Some other languages have that. Now, do you guys use that in Kotlin or anything? I know you do some Kotlin work. Do you guys use delegates at all?
I use delegates in Android apps. That's kind of a common thing, as a
Okay.
pattern, essentially. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought I've seen it in a couple of different Java apps, especially. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
I mean, I like the whole idea that Lewis started there with that Notion site and like doing almost these request for proposals or request for comments, whatever you would call these documents.
yeah,
It's a really good way of collating community feedback, I think.
yep. And like I said, I mentioned delegates the other day because Adam Cameron had a blog post that was talking about delegates. I thought he was doing some Kotlin stuff. That's why I was like, oh, I think Luis is doing some of that stuff. You should go check it out. And so I sent him the link, and so now I can have a read through and see what he thinks and make sure we did it right.
Yeah.
So some other stuff they might have missed. So Lucy's released another stable.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a minor bug fix release. It's called 539.166. There is a blog post that Gavin is putting into the show notes, into the chat here. But essentially, it fixes a few things that caused issues under heavy load when it comes to concurrency. And that we saw that in the, I think, last stable, which was the .160, if I'm not wrong.
Think
That's
so.
when that popped up. And we ran actually into a few of these problems that were fixed in a snapshot 162. And I think they probably found and fixed a few more things and released that as 166, I guess.
Yep. So that was released last week. So good to see them still releasing those bug fixes as they continue to work on Lucy 6. I know that they're working hard on that one, but it's nice to see they're keeping up with the 5 series. So
Yeah, there is even a 5310, right?
yeah, there is one, and I'm not sure if that was just, if that's like another set of features they're adding, or if that's just more bug fixes sort of collecting, or I know usually that's a minor release, so that's a patch in most people's world, but in Lucy the patches are the third number is actually a minor, so
Yeah.
it's like platform and then major and then minor, so 5310 would be the next minor release. but I'm not sure what's in that one. So, but yeah, so we'll have to keep an eye on that one. We'll let you know as soon as we know more about that. And
Yeah.
then
The
in
next,
case,
the next, I was gonna say the next one is interesting. Like restoring the CFadmin log viewer. Oh, that's kind of
yeah,
weird. What happened there?
so basically there's a security issue where viewing the files, because the viewing the files could have a cross-site scripting type stuff. So basically, if someone has something bad, it goes into your log files and you open it in the HTML viewer, and now your HTML code is possibly showing bad stuff. And so they remove the ability to click on the file to view them. So you can change settings and do other things in the admin,
Ah,
but you couldn't view it. So Charlie wrote a blog post just to let people, if they really need to get access to those files, because that's their only way to access them. Because some people don't have access to the servers, they don't have access to the logs unless they're looking through
mm,
the admin. And so he basically got a way for you to change your folder structure back to the old files just so you can do that. So he took a snapshot of his. But Mark Takata mentioned on Facebook, where someone was asking about this, and I pointed them to the problem. He said that they are working on the fix, so hopefully an update soon will have a sanitized view of the log file, and that's the key. So they
mm.
just removed it temporarily. It will be coming back, but that's why they did it. So if you really, really, really need it, Charlie can give you basically a copy of the old log viewer folder, so you can copy the code back in, so that way you can view your files on there. But do it at your own risk. It's done for a reason, and hopefully we'll have that
Yeah,
fixed
that's
in the
fair
new
enough.
version soon. So yeah, I mean they could have announced that they were working on a fix instead of just taking it out and everybody freak out. But anyway, we assumed as much. Okay, so next up we have webinars, meetups, and workshops. And thanks to Kai, he's actually one of the people that recommended it to me. We have an Audis event calendar for Google. So now you can just add the Audis events into your Google Calendar, so you have an option to see our events as we update stuff. So thank you for recommending that and testing it, because trying to find the right link and the right settings to be able to have somebody it was pretty weird.
That was tricky to figure that out. Yeah, I agree.
So,
And then
but
when you start changing events in your own calendar and it doesn't get, replicated in the other person's calendar, all of a sudden it's like, oh God, this is unnecessarily complicated.
yeah, but we got it working. So I'll share this in the chat for those watching, and then in the show notes, obviously.
Yep. So another thing from an events point of view, actually tonight apparently at 7 p.m. Eastern time, which, if I'm not totally wrong, is something like 7, 8 hours from now, the Michigan CFAC is having a meetup, and Nick Kwiatkowski is presenting on APIs and Cold Fusion. So he's going to show how he builds REST endpoints using Adobe Cold Fusion and Lucy REST endpoint connectors. So I think he's using the native functionality built into the engines, and also is doing a deep dive into Postman and how that works and how you can use it to build and test APIs. That is going to be online. There is a URL that we also put into the show notes, and apparently there will be a recording, and they put that on their YouTube channel, which is actually at CFML. Huh, that's
Yeah,
a nice
I
channel name.
I think since YouTube allowed us to choose your own usernames now, you can actually put your usernames in there, and
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet. I probably should, but yeah, so that's cool. So yeah, they've been releasing other videos, and that is a Teams link that I sent through, so you can do the Teams browser to watch that.
Ah, okay.
Just so you guys know.
You should be able to do that in your browser. You don't even need the apps for Teams, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's an option like, how do you want to open this link? So, yep. And then we have another one of the meetings tonight from it's the CIFA Tech Talk, which is the Indian-based meetup group. And so theirs is at midnight Eastern, so that's pretty late for most of you guys, but 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Indian Standard Time, November 16th. So I think that's tonight at midnight, or 10 p.m. for us Pacific coasts. Be basically dinner time for you, Kai.
Yeah, pretty much.
But Mark Takata is giving his advanced PDF workflows with Adobe Cold Fusion and DDX. And so that, I think, is the same one he did at the pre-conference for ITB. But if you guys want to check that out, there's a link up on Eventbrite. I'll share that with you there. And we did want to let you know that the Audis webinar for this week. Due to some illness and deadlines and with the upcoming holiday and all these other workshops and things we're going to be discussing here shortly, we decided to postpone Daniel Garcia's Audis webinar until January. So we're pushing it back a couple of months. So sorry about that, but there's tons of other great content, and you'll find out more about it when we start talking about CF Online Summit, because they've got some sessions this week too.
And there's also the CF Hawaii meetup, managing all your ColdFusion servers with CommandBox with Brightwood. I wonder who that person is. Does he have anything to do with CommandBox even?
Maybe.
So he's going to talk about like CommandBox introduction, how it's a standalone, nice native tool for Windows, Mac, and Linux that gives you a CLI, tool interaction, package management, all these things that we like from just being CommandBox, right? Like run your servers in CommandBox and basically live in the CommandBox shell more or less, from like development over testing and deployment to production. I mean, we run a lot of production code on CommandBox, and that just works fine, essentially. So that's going to be an interesting meetup, I think. It's on meetup.com, and I think they use this Adobe screen sharing tool. I forgot the name.
Adobe Connect, I believe, yeah.
Adobe Connect, thank you. Yes, they use Adobe Connect, if I remember correctly, for their meetups. That is on Friday this week at 2 p.m. And 2 p.m. I would assume that is Hawaii time.
I think that's Pacific time because it's 5 p.m. I'll look and see. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I didn't put the p.m. in there.
It's 2 p.m. at
Pacific time.
Somewhere.
Yeah, it's 2 p.m. Pacific time. I think it's like noon Hawaiian time. So
yeah, so that would be 11 a.m. for me on the day before.
So,
no, the day after. Whatever.
Yeah,
no, it's
Saturday for you.
It's good. Yeah. If you are new to CommandBox and if you're interested in CommandBox, you should maybe consider joining that session.
Yeah, I mean, CommandBox is a bunch of cool different pieces of it, and this is just all about the servers. So definitely a good session. And then we have the Audis office hours coming up on December 2nd. So basically this is where Autusians can be on a Zoom call and answer whatever questions you guys have. So jump in and sort of see how it goes. The first session was really nice. We just chit-chatted a little bit, talked about different things. We looked at some issues with moving to like View 3 and the Webpack and the changes needed in Elixir and everything. And so we're going to be having some more people there. So Daniel Garcia will be the host, and he'll be having a few Audis people there. So just a way to get in there and just ask some questions. Maybe you want to dive into something, So let us know if you've got any questions in advance. We'll try and get the right people there. But the link for that is available there for you guys to register in the chat.
And then in the same series of like Friday sessions, there is the Auto Software Craftsmanship Book Club, only for Patreons. And that happens on the second Friday of each month. And we're going through Clean Code, a handbook of agile software craftsmanship by Robert Martin. And the focus is on chapter 2, I think, for that next session that you're running, right? Like naming conventions.
Yep, as I always like to say, one of the two hardest things in programming, along with cache invalidation and off-by-one errors.
What is wrong with help 27 as your variable name or your function name?
It's pretty interesting. I mean, I think a lot of books, you can sort of fly by in a couple of, just a couple of hours when you're doing sort of like the book club setup. But the clean code one, there's so much actionable information in there, and like the naming conventions one, I think is a big one, because obviously naming is pretty hard, it's pretty important, and there's a lot of some guiding rules in this chapter, and the Audis coding conventions has a lot of them already built in, but I think there's some good ones here that we're probably missing. And like one of them was, the variable names, the longer the use of it, the more important it is to be, valuable, like using I for a loop. If it's a 3-line loop, using I is fine, but if it's a 50-line loop with a bunch of other stuff in it,
local scope, essentially, it doesn't really matter for that case.
So the length of the variable should match the scope of its use type rules and stuff like that. Right. So there's a lot of really interesting things in that chapter, and so we'll be meeting and discussing that. And then the previous week, we actually did do the first Patreon club, Software Craftsmanship Book Club for the Patreons last week, November 11th, and that was a pretty good one. We had, a smaller group because of Veterans Day. A lot of people were off supporting the veterans. But we did have quite a few people in there, and we talked about the introduction and the chapter 1 and sort of talked about what is clean code and everything. And there's a CFcast recording up for that. So if you guys want to jump in, you can go watch the CFcast recording. You do not have to be a Patreon to watch the recording, but we're trying to make it as a Patreon perk to be involved with the conversation. So get in there and give us your feedback, your tips and everything. And it was really good. We had Brett DeLine was in there, and David was in there as well. We had Grant from Audis team. We had a few different people. We had Scott and Andrew Davis as well. So it was really good. But yeah, it was pretty interesting. I had a lot of fun, and I think it's really good. And I think it's a good book to read. Have you read that one, Kai?
I've read parts of it, but it's years ago. Essentially, it's like I have the book in my bookshelf, but yeah, not recently gone through it.
Yeah, and then one of the things is too, a lot of people who do read it from CFML sometimes have trouble, translating in their mind the Java stuff to CFML. So we'll be discussing that and working through it until translating it, and we'll be looking at maybe some of the things that don't quite make as much sense in a CFML world compared to Java, with obviously some differences in the languages, but I think it'll be pretty good. And if you are a Patreon, you can jump into the community forum where we'll be discussing it, where we'll share the links to jump into the Zoom call too. So that's in there. And if you're not a Patreon, think about signing up.
Correct. And then we have a few other events. One is a ColdFusion security training that Pete Freitag is running. That happens in December, on Tuesday, December the 13th, and Wednesday, December 14th, over 2 3-hour session each during daytime Eastern Standard Time. And I can highly recommend that class. One of my clients is booking Pete regularly, like every second year or so, for an updated security refreshment course kind of for the developers. And I've been sitting in 1 or 2 of them, and it's really interesting, to look at like your CFML code from a security point of view. It's kind of, gives you a bit of a different angle to think about problems and look at problems.
Yeah, for sure. Pete's stuff always scares you in a good way, and I really highly recommend it. I've actually taken a version of this workshop over I think it was a few years ago at CF Summit when he offered it as a pre-conference one, and it's very, very good. It's $9.99 a student or $8.99 for early discount. But it's good that it's broken up over 2 days, and he gives you like the VM with a whole software, and you sort of work out what could be done to this code, how to do it, and then how to stop you from doing it. So it kind of teaches you how to be a little bad person and then how to stop that bad person. So I think it's pretty neat. Obviously building on top of the OWASP's, top 10 for different things. And so very, very good. So highly recommend it.
Then there are some Adobe workshops and webinars. They sometimes run like full day workshops, but the ones that we have here, I think, are not full day. They are webinars on specific topics. One is The Road to Fortuna, which is probably talking about like, ColdFusion 2023 and the alpha or the beta or something like that. That happens on November 23rd. And then there is one in December, shortly before the holidays, actually, quite close to the holidays. Building native mobile applications with Adobe ColdFusion and Monaco.io. And both are run by Mark Takata.
Yep, always a mouthful. But yeah, so Mark is doing both of those, and if you want to see the full list, you can look at the meetus.adobeevents.com/ColdFusion, and that there's a good little list. They do seem to be mixing that list with the online CF Summit, which we'll talk about in the conference section shortly. So if you guys look, there might be a couple of sessions listed there versus the other part. But yeah, so it's one of those things where they try and post them up there. I think Charlie's one is on that list, and there's another one on that list that should be in the online CF meetup. Anyway, long story short, that little link is good to keep an eye on what's coming up.
And then we've got a whole bunch of CFcast updates, like new content. So one is the ColdBox Master Class that is publicly and free available for everyone. We talked about that before. There is the software craftsmanship book club the first session where we talked about that as well. And then there are 2022 ForgeBox module of the week and VS Code hint, tip, and trick of the week. And both of them had one new video recently.
Yep, and then of course we're still working on a bunch of new series. We got the Boxifying third-party library from me. Eric's going to be working on his ColdBox Elixir series, and then Daniel Garcia is working on getting started with ContentBox. And then of course we have more of those ForgeBox and VS Code podcast snippets that we release every week. And then we have the ITB videos. For those who are not ITB ticket holders, if you're a subscriber to CFCasts, you'll be able to get all the ITB videos very soon. So we're going to be releasing those in December as a little 12 days of ITB Christmas. So we'll be doing that very soon.
ITB Christmas, ooh. Okay.
Yeah, we like the 12 days of Christmas, so
yeah,
we're bringing them out, and so we'll probably do a couple of videos, related videos. So on one day you'll get some of the testing stuff, another day maybe you'll get the JavaScript framework pieces or stuff like that. So we're releasing the videos. So that's just something we like to do. That way you got stuff to watch over the Christmas break. So yep, CFCast, if you guys want to check that out, again, lots of great content, some free, some paid. Best CF training videos out there, I think. Okay, conferences and training. So now let's talk about CF Summit Online. So as we mentioned, this is the online version of Adobe CF Summit because we couldn't record in Vegas due to some new laws and regulations which would have made it ridiculously priced. So basically what that means is now you get an online conference. So those sessions are going to be recorded over the next few months, and you can see a blog post on it, which I'll be sharing here, but also you can see that there's quite a few sessions already scheduled, and they're going to basically try and get everybody to present online. So what's the first couple we have, Kai? Sorry, as you write about to grab a drink.
Yeah, I was. That's fine. So the first one I've got on the list is how the Adobe CF Docker images have evolved from Charlie Arad. That's this week, actually. That
tomorrow.
Is tomorrow, isn't it? 16th?
Yep,
yeah.
Exactly.
And there is like an event registration link to join that one. And the second one is a sneak peek into Confusion Builder on VS Code from Nikhil Dubey. That's on Friday, if I'm not wrong, November the 18th. And then there are like two more next week and the week after next.
Yep, so we got Devin Tattestall talking about Fusion Reactor. We got Brad Wood on the 30th talking about RabbitMQ. And there's many more scheduled in December and January. And then all the speakers are trying to block out their time, so we'll have a lot more. I just shared the link, and I'll share my screen real quick to show you the screen, because we have the schedule here on the little website. So if you look down here, the schedule's a little out of order. So it's in the order for the most part. But so you'll see Nikhil's coming up on the 18th, and David's, Brad's, and you got David Byers on the 1st of December. Then you got Brian on the 12th, and then Mark Takata. So he's actually doing that one on the 22nd. I think it was said the 23rd on the other list, but then you got Daniel Garcia in January, and then Charlie Earhart. See, that's tomorrow, so that's out of order. And then Ray Camden's on the 7th. So looks like they've got to put those in the right order. But a lot of cool stuff there. So a lot of content and more coming, so you'll be very busy with all that stuff. We'll try and update as we hear more. But something else happening today, right?
Yeah, then we get into more conferences. There is Deploy from DigitalOcean happening now, pretty much today and tomorrow. And they call it the Virtual Conference for Global Builders. Subtract complexity, add developer happiness, join us on a mission to simplify the developer experience. DigitalOcean is a hosting company, essentially. They do like quite good hosting offerings for everything from like little droplets to run a mini application to big virtual server farms, more or less.
Yeah.
I play on a similar league like Linode. That's kind of another company that's doing a similar thing. I've never been to a virtual or a real event from them, but I mean, the product is kind of nice that they offer. So I would assume there's something interesting in the conference, probably, if you're into this kind of thing.
Yep, and it's free, and it's a lot of great content. They have a lot of good offerings. The app platform is pretty neat too, so you can just basically deploy an app or a Docker container to the app platform, and we play with that a little bit. It's got some cool features for sure. But yeah, we just always like the fact that it's not as complex, and that's what one of the things is subtract complexity. Because AWS, you can configure everything, which means you're sort of overwhelmed with configuration options. So DigitalOcean keeps it to what you really minimally need and does the job really well. It has a lot of options.
Yeah.
It's for what you want to add service-wise, but not too many crazy configurations. And so that's why we're using them at Audis Solutions. We host all our stuff on DigitalOcean. They're a great platform, so we definitely like their stuff. So go check it out. I'm not saying that the other ones aren't, necessary or great for their needs, and we use AWS for certain things and certain clients, but
It really depends on your requirements. I mean, like everything from private hosting to big clouds, small droplet hosting, whatever you want to do. I mean, if it fits your requirements and your needs, you should go with that. I mean, there's no right or wrong.
Yep.
I mean, maybe there's a wrong if you run your server under your desk. That
in your closet.
Let's not talk about these cases. But apart from that,
that reminds me of the thing I saw on Twitter where somebody unplugged a Mac Mini in the closet one day, apparently, and that was the VPN that had everybody from the Office HQ connecting to the Twitter servers or something 10 years ago or something. And so
stuff like that can happen if you host things in your office.
Yep. Well, we have Into the Box with Tam coming up December 7th in 2022. So we'll be speaking down in the High Eccentric down in El Salvador. And there's going to be, I believe, some English sessions, a lot of Spanish sessions, and maybe even a Portuguese one as well. And that's going to be split up into a couple of tracks. They're going to be doing some normal sessions as well as sort of more of a deep dive workshops. And so it's a great place to get started. And the great thing is in El Salvador, they don't have all the stigma with Cold Fusion, and so they're happy to see something more productive and efficient than just straight Java, like a lot of them are learning from school. So
that's really interesting, right? Like when you break into like one of these more emerging markets where that bad connotation is not there. It's kind of, I find it really interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, and I know that Luis has already been to like 2 or 3 conferences in Spain and Malaga. It was at the .NET one this week already, so he's trying to get out grassroots and just really reach out and spread the word.
Yeah.
But so we also have Vue.js Amsterdam 2023, right?
Yes, so that happens in February in, guess where, Amsterdam, Theater Amsterdam. I don't know what exactly that venue is, but I guess it's kind of well known over there. It's a very big Vue conference, world's most special and largest Vue conference. There's a call for papers available now on a Google form, and there is blind tickets available. I'm not quite sure what blind tickets are.
I like this term. So blind tickets is you're buying before you know who's speaking, what workshops or anything, because you're buying it blind. You're blindly buying, knowing that it's going to be a great conference before you know what's actually going to be there.
So it's kind of an early, super early, very early, not knowing what's going to happen, early bird.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think we should name some of the IT tickets that, because some of the times we have early bird before you know, and so it's like usually our super as well. But DevNexus is also going to be in Atlanta, April 4th through the 6th, and their call for papers ended last night. I got a couple of sessions in last minute, but we should have that going live. It's April, I believe. I'm curious if we'll get anybody else from the Audis team. Brad and Luis have spoken there before and on different things, so it'll be kind of cool. But it's a great conference. They've got like 10 different tracks. They've got a lot of different things on security, software design, DevOps, Agile, you name it, they have it. They've got front-end JavaScript and web stuff too, so lots of cool stuff.
Then we have another Vue.js conference in May, Vue.js Live. I'm not quite sure if the dates are correct. May 5th and 8th.
I know, it throws everybody. Yeah, it's kind of a weird one.
Is it around the weekend? Like one conference day is Friday, the other one is Monday? That's kind of a bit of a weird choice. But anyway, 35 speakers, 10 workshops, lots of people joining online globally. They say 10,000 plus, and 300 luckies meeting in London. So I guess they're selling 300 on-site tickets.
So they changed the dates to May 12th and 15th. So I keep forgetting to update that there.
Which doesn't solve the mystery. Like why are there 2 days in between?
Yeah. So I'm wondering if I get down here to the sessions, or if they'll maybe have like the black. No, you'd think it'd be something. Maybe the workshops. Oh, see, the May 12th is in person and May 15th is remote. There you go.
Okay. Yeah.
So
cool.
basically, they'll have a repeat on the 15th probably with some of this stuff. So interesting, but remote with full ticket, remote full ticket with multipass. So interesting. Oh, you can do remote participation on the 12th and the 15th. Interesting.
If we have to look at it and try to figure out how it works, it's too complicated. It's clearly too hard then.
Yeah, for sure. Nope, I get you. And so the next one up is Into the Box 2023, the 10th edition. And we mentioned it's May 17th through 19th, 2023. And we have the call for speakers now available. We'll be updating the website with sponsors and everything as we get closer. But just know that it's going to be a big one. It's going to be lots of fun. And then CFCamp, none for 2022. But finally, we have some news, right? In case you missed it.
In case you missed it like 20 minutes ago, CFCamp 2023 happens 22nd and 23rd of June, and there will be other events on the days before CFCamp. Same venue, Freising in Bavaria in Germany, quite close to the airport. Lovely, picturesque little Bavarian city with old houses to look at and other stuff to do in Bavaria and Germany. So make sure you come. I'm not quite sure what like it's on like Donkey Kong means, Gavin, that you put into the show notes.
It's on like Donkey Kong. It's just it's a catchphrase from a movie that hey, I'm like you like your Switch and stuff, right? They have Donkey Kong on there. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it with that. So there are more conferences if people, if that wasn't enough, on confs.tech, and we have that link in the show note. There's a huge list of conference for almost any language and community you can think about.
Yep, I actually found another one yesterday. I should probably share it. It was basically a link from people who are wanting to submit to conferences, but it actually has a ton of them. So I'm going to share it. It's just a GitHub repo, but I just put that in the show notes as well. So I saw that yesterday. There's so many.
There are some GitHub links like that around. There used to be one specifically for Android and mobile conferences, for example, as well. And I mean, the other thing, if people generally enjoy conferences and want to present at conferences, if you go to those sites like papercall.io or sessionize.com, where call for papers are hosted regularly, they quite often have a list of all the conferences that host call for papers on their platforms as well. Mm-hmm. So you can go through those lists and you say like, oh, I find this conference interesting and I find maybe this location interesting. I'll try to pitch a talk to them. That is something that a lot of people do as well.
Yeah, and we did like using some of those systems, but we got so much spam, and it wasn't people that were just like they just conference spammers. I mean, they're just sending out 3 million talks to try and get someone. They wouldn't respond to our questions as well, or stuff like that. And so
that is unfortunately a side effect of that, and you find that particularly from my experience with like tech pre-sales people, because one of their KPIs is like, you have to present at 12 conferences per year or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then they just submit to almost everything and, try to get in somewhere.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we did like there's a lot of cool tools in it, but it was hard. That's probably why we went back to the Google form. So, but okay. So next up, we have some blogs, tweets, and videos of the week. And first up, we have a tweet. I'll share my screen. You want to talk about it a little bit? I don't know if you saw this one yet or not, Kai.
I haven't seen the tweet, but I know a few things about the topic. So Brett talked about queries on queries. Once again, speed optimization. So query on queries on Lucy used to be a bit problematic in terms of performance, because some things were essentially, depending on how your query was built, some things would essentially run single-threaded or synchronized or in some weird, super slow way. So a few, I almost want to say years ago, 2 years ago or so, Brad made a lot of improvements to query of queries in Lucy, and that got taken into the product eventually. So that queries of queries on Lucy is now actually faster than Adobe Cold Fusion. And apparently he's done some work yesterday on the 14th, building a proof of concept to improve it further with parallel streams, and it looks to be 60 to 70% faster across the board. That is really cool, and he's looking for someone who's potentially interested to help sponsor the work so that this could be become part of Lucy and gets cleaned up and gets kind of like, built as a proper feature instead of a proof of concept.
Yeah, and so you can see here, those who are watching, the graph looks kind of crazy for Adobe. Adobe 2021, when you start doing the parallel stream. So the red line is the asynchronous, the blue line is the synchronous, and the yellow line is Adobe. And so there's obviously something going wrong in there somewhere. Apparently he says he thinks Adobe's recompiling the Java expression for the light clauses like every single time, but Lucy's caching them, and so that's why it looks kind of crazy. So there's the spikes make me think weird things for sure. But yeah, so it's just kind of cool.
Yeah, I personally, I'm not a fan of query of queries. I mean, I see why some people who live heavily in this query metaphor like it, particularly when you have like a long history with like, Cold Fusion as a platform or Lucy as a platform. What I find myself doing more these days is like run a query, get an array back, and then use, array or struct filter functions or map and reduce on the data set to do other stuff with it, essentially.
Yeah, someone actually, one of the Otis channels was asking about that the other day. They had a query and they wanted to do a query. They wanted to know the best way to do it. And I'm like, it's an array. Just do a filter, and there you go, done. Like you can do a reduce if you want to know what, because they're trying to get like a row number back from it or something. I'm like, yeah, you just do a reduce and you get the index out, and away you're done. And I actually found out that because the JavaScript has a find, array.find, and you can actually pass on a closure. And so recently Cold Fusion added that too. The documentation on it is a little bare, shall we say. But I found out, well, you can do that. I just don't know if you can pass, if you get the item as well as the index back or not from the closure. I'll have to look and see. But yeah, basically once you have the data, array stuff that's basically what the query is sort of doing. Having to map on some SQL syntax on top of it doesn't really help you, really. So
Exactly. And like at the end of the day, particularly if we work on an API, that's usually what you want to get out of it anyway. Like, a structure of arrays and struct in some way, basically, to get JSON out of it or something like that.
Yep.
But what I find is it requires a significant mind shift in people. Like when people are used to writing queries and then tweaking the data with another query of query or a series of queries or running queries of queries in a loop or some stuff like that.
Yep.
And they look initially at like code using filters or map reduce and stuff like that on data structures. You get like quite often there's like, why is it so complicated? But it's not, it's just a different approach to solving the same problem that can be much easier transported into other technologies as well, because query of queries really is kind of a relict of the early days of Cold Fusion, isn't it? I mean, from my point of view at least.
Yeah, I think it was just harder to do things back then, and a query made sense. If you had a query and you wanted to put two queries together, you could join them or something. But again, it's like once you have an array object, like that makes way more sense just to do that, especially if you can use some of Luis's sort of stream stuff, because you can do parallel streams and everything and process the items independently of each other, especially if they're just like doing some type of conversion or construction on it. You just loop through them. So but anyway, I'll let you guys check that out, but I think it's nice to have some optimizations for it, because sometimes writing a query makes a little bit of sense, but depending on what you're trying to do, because obviously some people don't even know how to write queries. We forget about that in Cold Fusion, that in other languages, people don't get access to the database. They just...
Yeah, true. Yeah.
You go to a JavaScript meetup and people are like, what's SQL? We don't write SQL. We just use these...
I see that in the Android and mobile dev community quite a lot as well. It's like, oh, just use a SQLite database on your device. And everyone is like, how do I do that? How do I get data in there? And I'm like, use SQL. It's like, it's not a given that people know that.
Yeah, they use query builders for most things now. They use ORMs and stuff, and I was like, oh really? I never thought about using an ORM in JavaScript because of I always get the data from somewhere else. But yeah. Okay, we also had a blog post from Ben Adele talking about using fallback avatars, because he's been on the little thing about using gravitars. So he did some work proxying them through Cold Fusion to get better header types and everything else. And so in this one here, he wants to sort of do the defaults. So installs a font RoboMono, and then basically he draws text centered onto a Cold Fusion image. So in this one here, a lot of you guys have probably seen them if you log into Google and you don't have an image. They'll spit out an image, a circle or a square that has the letters in the middle, your initials or whatnot. So basically that's what Ben's doing. So it's generating an image, putting the text centered in the middle of it, and using CF content to spit it out. So it's kind of a cool little thing. And then of course there are other options. Ben says he uses this when he uses email, so he needs to do it on the server side. James Moberg had a couple of recommendations for some JavaScript libraries, so I'm going to try and add those in because I think it was from Twitter, so I'll try and add those in for you guys.
Cool. Then we've got two blog posts from Auto Solutions. One is from Lewis himself about the call for speakers for the Into the Box 2023. Again, we talked about that before. There is a link in the show notes, and make sure you submit one or a few talks or suggestions for talks. And the other blog post from Orders was about the Software Craftsmanship Book Club, which we also mentioned before, explaining what it is and what the purpose is and how you can join, essentially.
Yep.
And the TLDR is become a patron, and then you can join the live sessions.
Yep, for sure. And so we tried to make them more friendly to your time zones as well. So we've got them at 12 noon Pacific. So that way Kai doesn't have to get up super early to join in with those.
On a Saturday morning, 7 o'clock still.
Saturday morning, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So if it's worthwhile, he might get up. So maybe with coding in the Kiwi, he can get up again. But yeah.
For coding with the Kiwi, I definitely will get up.
Okay, so maybe we'll have to do that. Well, we also have a blog post from Brian Riley, and he was at a CF Summit talking about security, which is pretty cool. He was talking about Cold Fusion, XXE, and other XML attacks. So this is the first of what became a few blog posts based on a CF Summit 2022 talk. So talking about the security bulletin released in October. So as we talked about a little bit, the Cold Fusion XML security options and everything. And so he explains what is XXE, which we need to learn this stuff. But real examples. And this is a Mira. Ooh, so he actually used Mira to talk about it. Interesting. And then XML processing, and not as many people do XML anymore, but I don't know, in the Java world, is XML still being used quite a lot as people all moving over to JSON? Kai, what do you think?
Yeah, I would not agree with people not using XML anymore. I think that's kind of the wrong way to look at it. It's just like a data format that has pros and cons. I mean, if you look at let's say web services, like WSDL based web services, that's all XML, for example. Lots of data exchange formats are XML because there is an established way to attach schemas to XML to define data structures where there is a lot of tooling around. And I mean, while you can do some of these things with JSON schemas are quite weak, really, I find, compared to what you can do with like XML and XSD and all these kind of technologies. So I think XML has its place. But like everything, you need to find the right use case for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too. I guess people, I don't know if they've noticed it or not, but if you open up like a docx or an XLSX or a PPTX, they're all XML files underneath the hood, and a lot of them, a lot of things are hiding XML inside of them. But most people, when you say XML these days, they think of SAML and SOAP, but not everyone uses them, and you still can be using XML. But yes, it's a good blog post to check on, and definitely understanding more of that. Even if we're not actively using them, sometimes you might be surprised where the XML is hiding. So we also had a tweet from Brad, and so this one I think was pretty interesting because he finally fixed the upgrade flow in CommandBox.
Yeah, that is cool.
And so
I like that.
Yeah, we're chit-chatting a little bit. I'll share my screen so you guys can see, because I think there's a few comments after it as well. But he finally improved the upgrade flow in CommandBox so he can download the new jars and swap them out on the next restart. And so this is kind of how like Lucy does it with Lex file. If there's a Lex file in a certain folder, when it starts up, it'll basically take that, move it, load it. And this is basically, what he's doing now. So before you had to like download the new jars and, basically you put them in a different spot, so we couldn't do an upgrade per se. You'd have to like download a new version. So it just makes it easier now. So it's kind of cool. And yeah, so a lot of people singing praises to Brad. Pretty cool. So nice to see. Go Brad.
Well done, Brad.
Yep. Go Brad.
Good job.
Yeah, so that wraps up our blogs, tweets, and videos of the week. But we have the Find a Job section.
Yeah, so there are several positions available on getcfmljobs.com. It has currently over 30 Cold Fusion positions from 21 companies across 18 locations in 5 countries. So there's one new job that popped up there this week, a contract developer in Toronto, Ontario in Canada, that apparently came online yesterday, and I just had a quick look at the job description, and I can't really make out exactly what that is. I think they do need Cold Fusion developer, but you also should have some other skills like Java, Python, ArcGIS, and SAS. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
not purely a Cold Fusion job.
Yeah, let me share my screen. That is a pretty big one here. Diverse Links is the company, and this job description is definitely diverse.
Yeah,
So,
when I saw the company name, I was like, that's kind of an interesting name. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. See, IT diploma or degree in Cold Fusion. But it's got the space in it, which is interesting.
Yeah, I'm
So,
pretty sure that that must be kind of the recruiter getting something wrong. So I'm pretty sure they want an IT diploma or a degree, and then you also need to know Cold Fusion. It's
yeah.
probably meant to be a separate bullet point.
Yeah, ArcGIS, a lot of times the GIS software I've found in Cold Fusion, that's actually one of the first things I did with Cold Fusion when I moved to the US was work on a GIS tool because it was all Cold Fusion.
Really?
Yeah, which was pretty interesting. Okay, so we also have our special Patreon-sponsored job announcements from tomorrow's guides. We gave you a rundown at the start of the show, so we'll give a brief rundown here. But tomorrow's guides is a fast-paced leader in the UK care sector, and they've got a team of over 20 individuals in the UK working remotely to expand and improve their offering. And they're looking on trying to add a few people. A Cold Fusion 2021. They're a shop that uses Cold Fusion 2021, Node.js, React, and the Azure Cloud, and they use MS SQL and MongoDB. But yeah, they're looking for a couple of roles, and we'll share the link for those roles. And you want to tell us a little bit about the positions real quick?
Yeah, the senior CF developer is remote in the UK, permanent job, 60K GBP salary band, at least 3 years experience with Cold Fusion or CFML, I assume, database design, normalization, and ability to write, understand complex queries with SQL Server. They should know Git, which I guess is almost like a given these days, and should have a flexible skill set covering a wide range of development
Yep, and they got an automation.
technologies or approaches.
Yep, an automation test engineer as well for UK only remote permanent, circa 40k pounds roughly. Minimum 3 years experience with automated testing, experience with automated testing tools as Selenium, and API testing tools like Postman, Fiddler, etc.
Yeah, and both roles have a whole bunch of other benefits, like a company bonus scheme of £4,000, 25 days annual leave, plus the famous bank holidays. If you have missed that discussion, go back to the beginning of the podcast. A 6% employer pension contribution, access to free perks and discounts through PerkBox, long service awards, which is probably something like long service leave and stuff like that. A cycle to work scheme that is kind of cool, and a company and teams night out program.
Well, the funny thing is, it's a remote job, but they got cycle to work. So,
Well, I would guess.
yeah,
I mean, I
probably
don't
an
know,
office
but
too.
a lot of remote companies give you the option to, I don't know, pay for a desk in a co-working space, for example.
Yeah,
Or maybe they have an office where some people, can choose to attend, and then they can participate in that cycle to work scheme. It's regardless a good thing because we need less cars and we need more people to cycle.
yeah,
So
and more fitness is good too. Yeah, definitely. I think it's a cool thing, and yeah, I like the idea of having a remote job with the on-site option. And we go on-site with clients all the time. We definitely got a big win out of that. But it's nice to have the remote perks as well. We have some other jobs as well. Auto Solutions is looking for a US developer, so you guys can check that out on the Auto Solutions website. And then Nolan from CFCasts is also looking for a part-time CFML developer, and he blogged that earlier last week, and so we'll share that link as well.
Yeah. And I can totally vouch for Nolan. If you want to work with someone really good and really cool, you should have a look at that.
Yep. Okay, so next up, we have our ForgeBox module of the week, and since Kai is here, I thought why not talk about the.
You can't make my release from yesterday the ForgeBox module of the week. That's kind of like almost nepotism or whatever you call that.
No, I just thought you could tell us a little bit more about it. Maybe why you like working with Raygun. Tell us a little bit about the company, because Raygun for CFML, obviously it's a provider for Logbox, right?
It is in the new version that I'm currently working on, yes.
Okay.
So like I said earlier, like Raygun is a crash reporting tool, or it started as a crash reporting tool. And Raygun is a New Zealand company, founded here in Wellington by some people I know quite well. And so I became an early user of their platform when they started in 2013 or something like that, 2012, 2013. And wrote Raygun for CFML because I needed it and it wasn't there. And then I kind of started continuing to maintain that. And I use it as a crash reporting tool because it is really nice, as it supports many different technologies. And there are like data providing libraries from all sorts of different languages and tech. So CFML and Java and Kotlin, and for Android, for iOS, for JavaScript, for React specifically, for Flutter, for all sorts of things. So you can feed all your crashes and your crash reports and issue reports into the same system, and then you get kind of a unified view of, hey, there's something going on the server, for example, and I've got a spike in these types of crashes. And at the same time, I see there's an issue in the iOS client, right? And I can actually correlate this data, and that's kind of really, really useful to a lot of the work I do, essentially. And Raygun for CFML is kind of my hobby project, like just open source and done on my own, in my own time, or sometimes funded by clients of mine who I do CFML work for, and they need a certain feature or integration to go into Raygun, into the Raygun provider. But I have, and I should actually disclose that, I have a commercial relationship with them as well, because I do paid work for them on the Android and Flutter providers for the Raygun product.
Well, that's all good. So yeah, so just another option out there. There's a lot of tools out there, and so Raygun, obviously Kiwi company, is kind of cool, and yeah, they have a good offering. So if you guys are looking for a different provider, there are a few out there, but Raygun sounds like a great one. Yeah, so go check that one out, and the link is in the show notes. And then next up, we have our VS Code hint, tip, and trick of the week. And so since we had Kai on, I thought, let's ask you for one of your hints and tips. So this one you said you just got yesterday or just recently?
Yeah, I just needed to find and use that yesterday. So I had a bunch of code that was all over the place with tabs and spaces, historically, because it was like 10 years old files, and I know probably 20 people have worked on that. And so the problem was, normally in a project, you should have something like an editor config file. For the people who don't know what editor config is, it's almost a standard for IDEs and editors. It's a little dot file, dot editor config, and tools like Visual Studio Code and Sublime and IntelliJ and VI and all sorts of things support editor config. And in that editor config file, you can define, I want all, spaces to be tabs, or I want 4 characters indentation for CFML files, but only 2 for JS files, and 7 for whatever other exotic language. I want that for a reason. So you set up kind of how editors should treat your files. But what editor config doesn't do in most cases is it doesn't retrospectively fix your files. So I had this whole code base of files, and it's like, oh no, this is so painful.
See, I didn't know that. I thought it did. That's why I was so confused. Because on save, it does have some options to do things, but
yeah, I tried that in Visual Studio, and it fixes it for where I make changes, but all the untouched areas in a file, it doesn't fix them. At least not in editor config. And what you should actually also say is probably, not every IDE supports all editor config features. So it might well be that in certain IDEs it does that. So, but anyway, yesterday I was so frustrated. I was like, I need to get these files all into spaces because it annoys me to no end. So I found these plugins called Untabify and Tabify, if you want to do that. And essentially what it does is you install it into Visual Studio Code, and then you do like Control T, Control U, and you say like, okay, I want every tab replaced with 4 spaces. And it does it cleans up the whole file for you, you save it, and you're done, essentially.
Very
and that's
cool.
kind of useful. You can do the other way around, where you go from spaces to tabs. I have to admit, I don't know many people who do that because most code bases seem to be done with spaces these days. But there's probably a use case for that as well.
Yeah, I think we use tabs. We use the editor config though to change it, and with your VS Code setting, what you can do is when you open it, if you like tabs, it can convert the spaces to tabs. But when you save it, it puts it back in the spaces format, so Kai doesn't get mad when Gavin opens his file. And when I'm looking at it, it's all tabs because I like to be able to go move from, three arrow keys to move from the front of the line to the code, or 3 control spaces or whatever, so control movements, because I like that. I like tabs for that reason, but doesn't mean I can't save it, so the thing is, I understand that the Unicode stuff with spaces is better for a lot of different things. There's a lot of pros about that, but doesn't mean that when I'm working in my IDE I can't use tabs because I like using tabs for that reason. So I don't like I said, I think there's pros and cons for both, and having the tools to handle it should be the best way. Like your IDE should be able to open spaces, convert it to tabs, and when you save it, you can put it back in the format that Kai wants it. So,
Not just me. Don't make this about me, Gavin.
No, I'm just trying to make it relatable. But yeah, that's the thing is there's a lot of reasons for that spaces make sense, but it's usually for my side of it is usually tabs are more developer friendly when you're actually editing it, but spaces are better for readability and other things, and screen readers and other stuff like that. So anyway.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
So, but yeah, that looks pretty cool. So untabify, and then we also will send the link out for editor config, which we've actually done in the previous recommendations. But yeah, I always wonder though how good some of these are, because sometimes when I open things up, I feel like I've got 3 different things fighting sometimes for like tabs versus spaces versus linters versus other stuff, and I really wish they would play nice, because that's
Before I found Untabify, I tried to do it with CF format and get that kind of fixed that way. But then I realized that doesn't seem to have support for exactly that feature, that it can rewrite all the tabs into spaces or vice versa. And I found some other, and the problem was also it was like tag-based CFML code.
Yeah.
And I found sometimes CF format has some quirks around tag-based CFML code, so it didn't go that well. And then Untabify came to the rescue, essentially.
Yeah, and Scott says he just likes to intermingle them just to spice things up. Yeah, you would do that, Scott. Tab, space, tab. Yeah. That's why we don't let Scott in the repos anymore. But no, but thanks again for that recommendation, Kai. It's always good to have new hints and tips. So next up, we want to thank all of our Patreon supporters.
Yeah, these individuals are supporting our open source initiatives to ensure the great tooling like CommandBox and ForgeBox and ColdBox and ContextBox and all the other boxes out there. There is a need to, get support, feedback, monetary or unmonetary, by contributions to these libraries and platforms. And the best way to do that is you can become a Patreon on patreon.com/autosolutions. There are multiple packages and annual memberships that Gavin is probably going to explain soon. And some of them give you actual perks on top of just being a Patreon.
Yep. So we have annual memberships. You can save 10% when you do an annual. But yeah, the bronze packages and up now get a ForgeBox Pro and CFCast subscription as a perk for the Patreon subscription. So that's a cool little perk there for sure. You do get those profile badges on the community website. You also get your private forum access on the community website as well. And we also have a private channel on the Box Team Slack. And also, by doing that, you'll actually get some live stream access. So we have streams that I run coding with the Kiwi and friends, like me and Kai. And we'll have those. Those are usually going to be the fourth Friday of the month, and then we have the Audis Software Craftsmanship Book Club, which we're doing on the second Friday of the month, and those are Patreon only. So become a Patreon member, and you can join those 2 live streams. And then, of course, the community.autosolutions.com is where we share information with our Patreons, and those private access forums exist, and those little badges. So highly recommend checking that out. But we have a new Patreon this week. So Tia, don't have a last name, but Tia, thank you for being the newest Patreon. And since you're first time on the podcast hosting, you get to mispronounce all of our lovely patrons today, Kai. So good luck.
Oh, I don't have to read all the names, do I?
Yep, sorry. Until the end of the year, we're reading all of them. And next year, we're going to have to cut it down, and we'll maybe only do the top couple of tiers. But take a deep breath.
Okay, I'll give that a try. Let's start with John Wilson, Synaptrix, Tomorrow's Guides, who we heard some job advertisement from, John Clark, Gary Knight, Mario Rodriguez, Giancarlo Gomez, David Bellinger, Dan Carr, Jeffrey McGee, Dean Maunder, Nolan Erg, Wildebrun, and Abdul Rahim. Then we have Don Bellamy, Joseph Lamourie, Jonathan Parrott, Jan Janek, Laxma Turtohadi, Brian Dinelli, Carl von Stetten, Jeremy Adams, Didier Lesnicki, Matthew Clemente, Scott Steinberg. He is sponsoring this as Agri Tracking Services. Okay, like Agri Tracking Systems. Cool. Daniel Garcia, Ben Nadell, Richard Herbert, Brett Dolin, myself, Charlie Erhardt, Jason Daiger, Sean Oden, Ross Phillips, Matthew Darby, Edgardo Cabezas, Patrick Flynn, Stephanie Mongi, Kevin Wright, John Wish, Peter Emiri, Kavan Vanice, John Nessim, and Tia.
Yeah, so thanks everybody. Good job, Kai. Didn't do too badly in that.
Thank you.
That's definitely a lot to get through. But you can see an up-to-date list on our sponsors on the Auto Solutions website, and we spotlight a few of them as all-stars. But if you go to autosolutions.com/about-us/sponsors, you can see them all there. And it's been a pretty big episode, so thank you, Kai, for joining us. And great news, we're happy to say that we're finally able to go back to CFCamp. So that's awesome.
Thanks for having me. That was great. And yeah, thanks for allowing us to do this announcement here. That was cool.
Yeah, no problem. Like Otis loves CFCamp. We've always tried to support the conference, and us going to Europe. We're actually officially in Europe now. Luis signed the documents last week, so we're officially a European company. And so, we're definitely excited to get in and do more in Europe. And that a big part of that is helping support CFCamp and making sure that's a big success. So, yeah, we're really excited. And I'm excited because hopefully me and the wife can come visit. So, so that'll be really cool. So, thanks everybody for joining us. And it was great having you, Kai. And yeah,
great for being here. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. We'll have to have you on Coding with the Kiwi again soon. And everybody have a great week. And don't forget, June 22nd, 23rd, start planning a trip to Europe.
Get your passports ready, people.
Yeah, exactly. Have a good one, everybody.
Good. Yeah.
Show notes for this episode can be found at cfmlnews.modernize.io, where you can also subscribe to your favorite podcast player like Spotify or iTunes. We also have the link to YouTube to find more videos just like this. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.